The ring was still in my coat pocket when I walked into the courthouse and saw them standing there together. I don't know why I noticed the flowers first. White peonies, tied with a cream ribbon, clutched in Amber's hands. My best friend since the second grade. The same flowers we'd looked at together on Pinterest 3 months ago, laughing over a glass of wine while I showed her my wedding board. Those ones, I'd said, pointing at the peonies. If I could have any flowers in the world, those would be it. She'd smiled and said, "They're perfect for you." She was holding them like a bride, and she was standing next to Ryan. "I want to tell you," I screamed. "I want to tell you I did something dramatic, something that matched the size of what I was seeing." But I just stood there in the doorway of the civil ceremony room on the 3rd floor of the Brampton courthouse, still in my flight suit because I hadn't had time to change, still with the smell of jet fuel on my jacket, and I couldn't make a single sound. Let me go back, because this story only makes sense if you understand what my life looked like before that moment. I'm a commercial airline pilot. I've been flying since I was 22. Started with a regional carrier out of Hamilton, worked my way up, and by the time I was 31, I was flying wide-body aircraft across the Atlantic for a mid-size Canadian carrier. It's the kind of job that sounds glamorous until you actually do it. The hours are strange, the schedule rotates every few weeks, and your life is built around standby calls and weather delays and regulations that exist for good reason but feel like a cage some days. I love it anyway. I've always loved it. Ryan knew this about me when we met. He knew it on our first date at a tiny Portuguese restaurant on Dundas Street West. When I told him I'd just gotten back from a transatlantic overnight and hadn't slept properly in 30 hours. He thought that was exciting. He said it like it was something he admired. "You actually do something," he said. "Most people just talk about doing something." We were together for 4 years. We got engaged on a Tuesday in January in my living room during a snowstorm. No restaurant, no big production. He just got down on one knee while we were watching something on TV and said, "I've been carrying this around for 3 weeks waiting for the right moment, and I think the right moment is whenever you're in the room." The ring was simple. A thin gold band with a small oval stone. I'd never worn rings before. I wore it every day after that. Amber was my maid of honor, obviously. She'd been my best friend since we were 7 years old and shared a desk in Mrs. Prue's class at Folkestone Elementary in Mississauga. We grew up 3 streets apart. She was at my university graduation, my first solo flight, the night I got my commercial license. She was there when my dad had his bypass surgery, and I couldn't stop shaking in the hospital waiting room. She held my hand. She always held my hand. Ryan and Amber got along well. Too well, I used to joke. They had the same sense of humor, liked the same podcasts, texted each other memes when something reminded one of them of the other. I thought it was sweet. I thought it meant the people I loved most in the world liked each other. I thought that was something to be grateful for. I wasn't watching carefully enough. We planned a small wedding. Neither Ryan nor I wanted a big event. We'd talked about it early on and agreed. Courthouse ceremony, close family, dinner after at a restaurant in the Distillery District. Simple. Clean. Hours. We set the date for a Saturday in May, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My roster had me on a Montreal turnaround the week before, and then clear for 10 days. It was perfect timing. I'd been on standby the week of the wedding. Not the week before, the actual week. My carrier had a shortage on one route due to a crew member medical leave, and they needed someone on call. I'd flagged this with my scheduling coordinator and confirmed twice that the Saturday was protected. It was protected. It was in writing. On the Thursday before the wedding, I got a call at 6:40 in the morning. A crew member on a Friday morning Vancouver departure had tested positive for something and couldn't fly. The Friday flight had a connection in Calgary to an international leg that absolutely could not be pulled. They needed me. Not legally required to go, the Saturday was still protected, but I was the most qualified option, and the dispatcher I'd worked with for 4 years was the one calling. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't a genuine problem, he said. I called Ryan. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail explaining the situation, that I'd fly the Vancouver route Friday morning, overnight, and be back Saturday by 9 a.m. at the latest. Ceremony was at 2. I had 5 hours of buffer. I texted him right after the voicemail. Then I texted Amber and asked her to let Ryan know if he wasn't checking his phone. She texted back, "Got it. Don't worry about a thing. Focus on your flight." I boarded at Pearson at 7 a.m. Friday. The Vancouver leg went smoothly. It was the return that turned into a problem. A microburst over Lake Superior created a ground stop at Pearson that cascaded across half the departures out of YVR. My return flight sat on the tarmac for 3 hours and 20 minutes. By the time we were airborne and I'd worked through all the regulations about duty hours and handoff protocol and finally got myself into a crew car to the hotel for the mandatory rest period, I had 11 missed calls, not from Ryan. From my mother. There were 2 texts from Ryan, both sent at the same time at 11:23 a.m. Saturday. "We moved the ceremony to noon. Hope you make it." And then, "If you can't be here on time, that tells me everything I need to know." I stared at those messages in the back of the crew car while the driver navigated the airport connector road. Noon. He'd moved the ceremony to noon without calling me. Without getting confirmation, I'd even seen the message. I had been in mandatory rest. I had no control over any of it. I called him 12 times between 8:15 and 8:50 a.m. He didn't pick up once. I had an airport commuter flight to catch back to Toronto. I ran. I got through security faster than I'd ever moved in my life. I called my mother from the gate while I was boarding, and she picked up on the first ring, and the first thing she said was, "Sweetheart, where are you?" "I'm at the gate in Vancouver," I said. "I'm coming home. What's happening?" She was quiet for a second too long. "Mom." "What's happening?" "Ryan," she said, and then she stopped. "Mom, he married Amber," she said. "They did the ceremony at noon. I'm so sorry. We didn't know what to do. We thought you were coming. We kept thinking any minute you'd walk through the door." I sat down in the jet bridge. A gate agent asked me if I was okay. I couldn't answer him. My mother told me later what had happened in that room. She'd been there with my Aunt Carol and my cousin Britt, seated in the gallery, waiting for me. Ryan's family was there too. His parents, his brother. And Amber. Amber was there, and when noon came and I hadn't arrived, she didn't step into the background the way a maid of honor should. She stepped forward. And Ryan let her. My mother said she realized what was happening when the clerk started the formal process and Amber was standing in my spot. She said she stood up. She said she told the clerk to stop, that this was supposed to be her daughter's wedding. Ryan's mother told her to sit down. Ryan looked at the floor, and the clerk, bound by the legal process and not by anyone's family drama, continued. My mother left. She took Carol and Britt with her. Ryan's family stayed. I don't know why I'm still bothered by that detail, that his parents watched it happen and thought that was acceptable, but I am. I probably always will be. I landed at Pearson at 1:47 p.m. I took a cab directly to the courthouse because I still didn't fully believe it. I thought there was an explanation I was missing. I thought maybe I'd gotten the story wrong through a static-filled phone call from a woman who was clearly in shock. I thought maybe I'd walk in and find Ryan standing there looking for me, and Amber standing off to the side, and everything would make some awful kind of sense that was still fixable. What I found was Ryan and Amber, married, standing in the lobby with a small cluster of people around them. Ryan had his hand on the small of her back. She was in a white dress. Not a casual dress, a proper dress, fitted, with a low back, like something you'd plan and buy and have tailored. The peonies were in her hands. Ryan saw me first. His expression didn't change. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger who's walked into the wrong room. Amber looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." Just that, "I'm sorry," like she'd accidentally borrowed a sweater and forgotten to return it. I turned around and walked back out to the street. I stood on the sidewalk outside the courthouse for a long time. Long enough that a man walking his dog slowed down and asked if I needed help. I shook my head and told him I was fine. I was still in my flight suit. My overnight bag was over my shoulder. I'd been awake for most of the past 36 hours. And somewhere behind those glass doors, the man I'd planned to marry was married to the woman who'd held my hand in a hospital waiting room, and the peonies she was holding were from a wedding board that had my name on it. I found out later. Much later, through things that came to light in the weeks that followed, that Ryan and Amber had been together for at least 8 months, maybe longer. One of Amber's coworkers, a woman named Sophie, who I'd never met, but who somehow found me on LinkedIn and sent me an extraordinarily kind message, told me she'd seen them together at a restaurant in Etobicoke the previous October. She'd assumed they were just friends. It took her until May to put together what she'd actually been looking at. 8 months, while I was flying overnight routes and texting Amber from hotel rooms in Lisbon and Glasgow and asking for her advice about flowers and table settings, and whether I should do a first look or just walk down the aisle. There were other things, financial things. Ryan and I had a joint account. We'd opened it 18 months earlier to save for the wedding and for a down payment on a condo in the Bloor West Village. I'd contributed more than he had. My income was higher, and we'd agreed I'd put in a larger share. When I checked the balance 3 days after the courthouse, I found that a wire transfer had cleared on the Thursday I'd been on standby. The balance was $14,200 less than it had been the week before. He'd taken the money. Not all of it, not the half that was technically his, but a full withdrawal of everything above that threshold, an amount that represented most of what I'd put in over and above his contributions. He'd timed it for the Thursday, the day I flew to Vancouver, the day I couldn't be watching. I'm a practical person. I've had to make fast decisions in bad weather at altitude with 80 people behind me and a co-pilot looking at me for a call. I don't freeze, so I didn't freeze now. I called my bank before I left the courthouse parking lot. I froze the joint account. I documented everything. The wire transfer, the timestamps, the voicemails, the texts from Ryan about moving the ceremony, all of it. I called a lawyer on the Monday morning. Her name was Patricia Hollis, and she was the kind of person who said very few words and every one of them counted. She told me we had options. She told me the wire transfer to himself from a joint account, specifically timed to when I was out of province and unreachable, was worth looking at. He didn't do this impulsively, she said. This was planned. I already knew that. The dress had been the tell. You don't buy a tailored white dress on a Saturday morning. The civil suit took 8 months to resolve. Ryan contested it. He had a lawyer too, and for a while it looked like it might drag on into the following year. But in the discovery process, things came out. Emails between Ryan and Amber that predated the account withdrawal. A conversation where he specifically referenced the timeline, my flight, my overnight, the ground stop, as a window. He'd known about the weather system before I had. He'd monitored it. He'd moved the ceremony to noon, knowing I couldn't possibly be there, knowing that my mandatory rest period after a transatlantic adjacent duty cycle made me unreachable by phone. It was premeditated, not in the dramatic true crime sense, but in the quiet, calculated way that I think is actually worse. He didn't do it in a rage. He planned it over months, with another person I loved, and they executed it together while I was at 37,000 feet over the Rockies. The judge ordered him to repay the $14,200 plus interest. He also found that Ryan's characterization of me as chronically unavailable and professionally unreliable, which his lawyer had tried to use to establish the narrative that I had essentially abandoned the relationship, was not supported by the record. The judge noted, specifically, that I had a documented on-time performance record, that the Vancouver delay had been logged by Transport Canada, that I had made multiple documented attempts to reach Ryan by both call and text before, and during the delay, and that Ryan's decision to proceed with the ceremony at noon constituted a unilateral act without my consent or knowledge. I cried in the parking garage after the ruling, not dramatically, just quietly in my car for about 10 minutes. Then I drove home. Amber and Ryan did not last. I didn't find this out by tracking them or through any effort of my own. I'd blocked them both on everything the week after the courthouse, and I'd meant it. I found out through my cousin Britt, who'd heard it from someone in Amber's extended social circle. They separated 11 months after the ceremony. Apparently, the dynamic that had made their betrayal possible, the ability to be secretive, to plan behind someone's back, to prioritize what they wanted over what was true, turned out not to be a great foundation for a marriage. Whatever they'd built on those 8 months of dishonesty didn't hold. I'm not going to tell you I felt nothing when I heard that. I did feel something. I'm human. But it wasn't the satisfaction I thought I would feel back in that courthouse parking lot when I was running every dark outcome through my head. It was more like the quiet after a ground stop finally lifts, just space clearing. I moved apartments in the fall. I found a place in the west end of Toronto with a lot of light and a small balcony where I can see the lake on clear days. I got a kitchen table I actually like, and I put plants on the windowsill, and I started cooking properly instead of always eating at airports. My roster shifted, and I got a better block of weekends. I took a float plane certification course in the Muskokas because I'd always wanted to, and now I had the time to do it. I flew over Georgian Bay at dawn in September, and the light was doing something unrepeatable on the water below me, pink and silver, the kind of thing that makes your whole chest ache in the best possible way. And I thought, this is still mine. All of this, the sky, the job, the life I built, none of it went anywhere. The ring is gone. I sold it in July and used the money to buy a new set of nav charts and a very good pair of noise-canceling headphones. I don't regret that. I don't know what I thought love was supposed to look like before all of this. Probably something easier. Something that didn't require me to justify my job, or apologize for my schedule, or wonder if the people I trusted were actually where I thought they were. What I know now is that the things I never questioned about myself, the discipline, the steadiness, the ability to read a situation and make a call, those are not obstacles to being loved. They're just part of who I am. Whoever belongs in my life will know the difference between a woman who's unreachable and a woman who's in the middle of getting 80 people safely home. And in the meantime, the sky doesn't ask me to explain myself. It just opens up and I fly.